Alrighty, guys, pretty safe to say that Wicked has become a phenomenon. And there are a lot of different ways in which you could use that word, phenomenon. I think we oftentimes actually use that word a little too lightly, in my opinion. But I think for Wicked, it is truly a word that applies. And a lot of times, I think we talk about it in the sense of being a cultural phenomenon, just the way that it has totally taken over the popular pop culture and just popular media, no pun intended, over the last year, and just really become something of its own. You know, it obviously the Broadway musical was incredibly popular and well received in its own right. But I think this 2-part movie epic that's been going on for the last year now, I think has really captured the world and captivated the world in a very different way. So obviously it's become a huge cultural phenomenon. However, it has also, the franchise has quietly become a box office phenomenon as well. And that's what we're here to talk about, as well as just some loose rumors about Wicked 3. Perhaps we'll just kind of stick that at the end of the segment as well. But let's talk about the box office first. So I'm looking at box office numbers. I'm recording this, I think, before the final numbers have come out. And obviously when you're listening to this segment, it'll be about a week after. But I think that it's still worth discussing the first weekend just to give a sense of where Wicked is heading in its box office run. So Wicked for Good entered the weekend and came out as number 1. No big surprise. It wasn't really competing with a whole lot, although it will be competing with a few movies that we'll talk about in a little bit here. But it wasn't really competing with a whole lot. But it came out of the weekend as number 1 with a domestic gross of $150 million and $226 million worldwide. So let me see that again. $150 million domestically and $226 million worldwide. For context, this is higher than the first Wicked, which opened to $114 million domestically at basically the exact same time in the year. And that movie went on to make over $700 million. So between $700 and $800 million is a huge success, especially for a musical and a Disney, Marvel, Star Wars kind of movie, DC, right? So it's a huge deal, right? And I think the question became after that point, because of how successful Wicked was and it won Oscars and things like that, could Wicked for Good make $1 billion? I myself predicted that it would. And after looking at these numbers, I have a lot of confidence that that's still going to be the case. Now, for some more context with 2025 as well, I'm looking at an article here that's pointing out some of these numbers. In terms of opening box office weekend, it is the second highest opening box office weekend domestically this year, behind a Minecraft movie, which was $162.75 million, and third place, which is Lilo and Stitch at $146 million. Lilo and Stitch went on to, I believe, become the first billion-dollar film of 2025 in worldwide gross, and a Minecraft movie, I think, just made under $1 billion. So it was in that high $900 million range. So that bodes very well for Wicked for Good. It is worth pointing out, then let's be clear, it is worth pointing out that Wicked for Good, and it's regardless of whatever I have to say about the movie, I did my review last week and you can go check it out there, regardless of what I have to say personally, it is worth pointing out, Wicked for Good's reviews, and I think general word of mouth has been, it's not as good as the first movie. So one has to wonder that while Wicked Part 1 had less initial momentum with its box office run and eventually went on to make $700 million at the box office, whether or not Wicked for Good, the opening box office numbers are going to really inflate the initial momentum, but then the word of mouth is perhaps going to detract from it a little bit. I'm not saying it will. I actually still, just based on these numbers, because if these numbers came out and it was Wicked for Good makes less in its opening weekend than the first Wicked, I would have been a little concerned about its ability to keep momentum going with word of mouth. But, people still generally liked it. I think the movie has something like 65 to 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think people generally liked it. I liked it, generally speaking. I don't think it's nearly as good as the first movie, but I still liked it. And so I think, all the people who were going to see Wicked for Good are going to see Wicked for Good. It's the Thanksgiving holiday window. And I think also the people in between who didn't get to see Wicked in theaters last year, but eventually did get around to seeing it, I think are also going to be joining along for the ride. So I do feel pretty confident in Wicked for Good's ability to get close, I think, to the $1 billion mark. Is it going to be a failure if it doesn't make $1 billion? Absolutely not. If Wicked for Good even matches Wicked's box office numbers, huge success, in my opinion. Again, not knowing the exact numbers and calculations for profit, but I think a huge success in that regard. So we'll have to see. I think there's going to be some competition. Zootopia 2 is opening on Wednesday, or on November 26th, Thanksgiving Day, or the day before Thanksgiving, rather. And Zootopia 1 made $1 billion, so we'll have to see if those numbers are going to stunt Wicked for Good's numbers pretty severely. I don't remember last year there being, I could be totally wrong about this, I don't remember there being a huge movie that completely derailed Wicked's box office. Mufasa came out in December, so there was that. But yeah, Zootopia 2 might be a detractor, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 might be a detractor, and obviously Avatar Fire and Ash in 3 weeks will definitely be a detractor for Wicked for Good. But again, pretty different, still similar age ranges, I suppose, but I think different demographics of the movie-going audience, so we'll have to see how that all shakes out. Now, I promised at the beginning we were going to talk a little bit about Wicked 3 rumors, and I didn't want to make a separate segment because at this point in time, it's just sort of been people, who are part of Wicked saying, yeah, well, let's talk about Wicked Part 3. There have been a decent number of people on the Wicked front saying, yeah, if there's a story for Part 3, let's make a Part 3. And I think that, Cynthia or Ariana Grande had hinted that there might be future plans, but then she later backtracked on it. So really just raising the question at the end of the segment, should there even be a Wicked 3? Well, from a box office perspective, it seems fairly obvious that the studio should make a Wicked 3, even though there is really no, there's no precedent for it. There's no source material. So it would be a story that takes place post Wicked for Good. Again, no spoilers in this segment for Wicked for Good. I don't know. Again, it feels like you're really trying to test your luck at that point. If you want to push the envelope, you could, and there is a way in which it could be successful. I just feel like this is such a lightning in a bottle kind of moment with Wicked 1 and Wicked for Good that I just don't see it being that successful. But again, I could be wrong. At this point in time, nobody's come out right and said there are active plans for it. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, since if by the time I published this segment from the time I recorded it, there has been something. But again, I don't think that there's anything there right now. And I personally think let's just let this be a 5-hour epic and then move on from there. So anyways, guys, what do you make, first of all, of Wicked for Good's initial box office numbers? Do you think it can still hit $1 billion? And do you think there will be a Wicked Part 3? And do you even think there should be a Wicked 3? Let me know in the comments down below.